So now we're going to start talking about segmentation. But before we get into that, we need to understand how we define industry boundaries, right? So if I were to draw like a little bit of a table, okay, you'd have objects, actors, and then offer and demand. Okay? So, oh, and then you've also got a perspective, right? Okay? So, on the offer side, and what they are offering specifically, you are looking at a set of relatively homogeneous technologies and processes. Okay? Customers, or the actors on the offer side rather, are a set of firms producing and distributing relatively homogeneous products and services. And this is coming from the industry perspective. On the other hand, you've got on your demand side a set of relatively homogeneous applications under objects in demand, and on the actors you've got a set of clients buying relatively homogeneous products and services. So this is kind of a fancy strategy way of basically looking at a supply and demand curve. This is more the demand side, and this is more the supply side. Okay? So on the supply side, what you see is there are a group of similar firms on the supply side, the suppliers, providing a series of relatively similar products and services. On the demand side, you have a relatively homogeneous group of customers buying products that are relatively homogeneous with relatively homogeneous applications. So all I've done here is basically give you a very fancy way of looking at a supply and demand curve, but more from a strategy perspective. Okay? It assumes that suppliers and their products are relatively homogeneous, and so are the customers and the way that they use those products. That's all we've said. So let's think about this for a second and talk about drawing industry boundaries. And there's no right or wrong answer here, right? But boundaries are important. So let me ask you a question. What industry do you think Mercedes-Benz participates in? Think about that for just a second. What industry does Mercedes-Benz participate in? Would they be in the industry of the world auto industry? Would they be in the German auto industry? Would they be in the world luxury car auto industry? I don't know. There's no right or wrong answer here. What matters though is understanding the boundary is kind of a give and take between the industry and the market perspective. And the key criterion is substitutability. So on the demand side, are buyers willing to substitute between different types of cars across countries? And on the supply side, are they manufacturers willing to switch production between types of cars across countries? And so you have to kind of make a little bit of judgment. Let me clarify this just a little bit. Okay? So on the customer side, okay, maybe I'm a bad example, me personally, because I don't know a lot about cars, right? So if you look at a Mercedes, as far as I can tell, I don't know much difference between a Mercedes and a BMW. I do know that they're both German auto manufacturing cars, and so are German manufactured automobiles, and so is Audi and Volkswagen. So they're a bunch of German cars to me, right? So if you were to ask me what industry is Mercedes in, I'd probably say the German car industry. I probably would not put them in the luxury car industry because I would say that they don't necessarily compete with firms like Rolls-Royce and Bentley. Okay? And I probably wouldn't put them in the world auto industry either because I don't think you see a lot of Mercedes in in every single country of the world, right? But that's only my opinion. You're free to disagree with me. In fact, you could say Mercedes is in the world auto industry because they are in more than one country. You could say they're in the European auto industry because they're all over Europe. You can say they're in the luxury car industry because you personally, watching this video, would define Mercedes as a luxury car and would be a competitor to Rolls-Royce, Bentley, etc. So on the demand side, you can make some choices. But on the supply side, which industry does the manufacturer decide their main competition is? If Mercedes thinks that their main competitor is BMW, then maybe they are talking about being a German luxury automaker, right? Or if Mercedes sees their main competition as, I don't know, Tata coming from India, right? Then maybe they are in the world auto industry. So there's kind of a give and take between how customers would substitute between them and how suppliers would be able to switch between production of different types and cars across industries, right? If a Mercedes plant can make high-end luxury, middle level cars and kind of bad cars, low-quality cars, then they could actually be more in the world auto industry, and they wouldn't necessarily see themselves as participating exclusively in the luxury category, right? So there's a give and take between industry boundaries. Maybe let me give one more example to clarify. How about Walmart? Where does Walmart compete in, right? Is it an international food retailer? Is it an international commercial goods retailer? Is it an international internet retailer? Or is it a wholesaler because they have Sam's Club, right? So you're going to have to ask the executives of Walmart, who do you think your biggest competition is? Well, if they were to say Carrefour, which is the second largest retailer in the world, then you say it's in the international hypermarket industry. If they'd say their biggest competition is Amazon, then they might say, well, actually, it's in the internet retail industry. If they'd say their biggest competition is Costco, then you might say, because of Sam's Club, which is also owned by Walmart, that they are participating in the wholesale food and retail industry, right? So it kind of depends. And looking at you, the customer, what do you go to Walmart for? Do you go there to buy clothes or fruit or meat or frozen foods? What do you go there for? Sporting goods? That might also help you to understand which industry Walmart participates in. Okay? So there's kind of a give and a take between what the suppliers are doing and how the customers define those firms. So it's a matter of judgment. And you can do the same thing. Maybe let's talk about the pharmaceutical industry, right? Which things actually belong in the pharmaceutical industry, right? Would you consider those home DNA test kits now that they have? You swab your cheek and you wipe it on the you swab your cheek with a cotton swab, put it in an envelope, and they tell you, your genetic ancestry is X, Y, and Z, or don't worry, you are not the father. Would things like that be part of the pharmaceutical industry? What about like home diagnosis kits? I remember back in the day, you used to have those home HIV kits that you'd prick your blood and send that off. Is that in the pharmaceutical industry or not? Okay. What about diabetes medication that you do at home? Is that in the pharmaceutical industry? Of course, what about homeopathic and herbal medicine remedies? Is that pharmaceutical or not? What about just conventional prescription drugs? Are they pharmaceuticals or not? What about skincare products? Soap, shampoo, is that pharmaceutical or not? So, you can have a debate on any one of these, except maybe I don't think too many people would say that prescription drugs are not in the pharmaceutical industry, but these others, you could kind of have a debate about that, right? So it's hard to actually define what is and is not in the pharmaceutical industry. Again, that is some sort of, you define those boundaries through a negotiated understanding between the customers and the suppliers. So in our next video, we're going to talk about segmentation analysis in a very basic way, and we'll also talk about a way to understand opportunities for differentiation. Looking forward to seeing you then.